South Wales Police there. It is on our multi-view service if you'd like to continue watching it. We're going to move back to politics. I was talking to Labor's Mark Butler a moment ago, as mentioned off the top of the program. Available for us now out of Brisbane is Liberal MP, member for Petrie, Luke Howarth. Thanks very much for your company.
Great to be with you, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
I've written today in the business section of The Australian about you lot up in Queensland who are going to go down in the Origin decider, about you lot ripping off the West when it comes to the GST. We had a chat about this the other week, actually, and you surprised me at how sympathetic you were to fixing the system. I know that West Australians appreciate it, Mike Nahan in particular, the opposition leader over there. I wonder if you feel like the rest of the Queensland LNP are as on board. There's no trick question in this. I don't know the answer to it. I mean, one of my worries as a, sort of someone who's spent a lot of time in Western Australia is that politically speaking, both sides of politics are worried about Queenslanders not wanting the GST to be redistributed in a way that might see the state getting less than it currently does.
Look, I don't think that's a big issue if you explain it properly. If I said to people in my electorate and throughout Queensland that for every dollar that Western Australians spent on GST in their state, they only received 30 cents back, they would say that that's pretty unfair. And when you say, look, for every dollar that we spend here, we're actually getting more because of the poor performance of the state Labor government, then they start to understand that perhaps a system that doesn't reward, good work, so to speak, is a broken system. And if we want to move forward, and make sure that states, governments in particular, perform to their best of capability, then we need to be having a system that rewards success. Yeah, no, well put. All right, let's just quickly deal with the polls, then we'll move on. I mean, I know that, the standard line to these is that it's only a poll and, the only poll that counts is election day and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, there was an accumulation of bad polls that saw the end of a previous Prime Minister. We're now halfway there. Malcolm Turnbull has trailed for half as many polls as the number of polls he cited as a reason to remove Tony Abbott. Is the clock ticking? Well, I guess what we need to be focusing on, as the Prime Minister has said, is on the local people. And if we do that, then the polls and the politics should take care of themselves. Like this morning, I've been out doing local mobile offices in my electorate from 7 a.m. onwards, and 50% of people that came to see me this morning were talking about energy costs and about the price and the increase in their electricity bills. And that's what we've been focusing on. How can we deliver for local people? If we do that, the polls will sort themselves out. Can I jump in there? I mean, this is a compliment that has a backhander for your party. I get that with you. I mean, you held Petrie, the most marginal seat in the country at the last election. You swung it around and had an increase in your support when the rest of the party went cascading backwards and almost lost government. I get that you are finding that locally with what you are doing locally as a liked local campaigner by your electorate. But at the national level, there's a problem. There is clearly a problem at the national level. Well, I think if at the national level we focus on the people, and that's how we sort through it. I mean, we've just ticked over 12 months since the last election. It's still a couple of years to go. I can honestly tell you that I don't worry about the polls week in, week out, because I know the election's a long way away, and we've got to focus on the people. And if the leadership, if cabinet ministers and other members of the government around Australia focus on the people, continue to expose Labor for the weak policy, hard-nosed, politics-driven politicians that they are, then I think the Australian people, when it comes to the next election, will be able to say, right, who's best able to take us through, who's got a plan, and normally it's our side of government. I mean, we're the only plan on our side for jobs, a great example. When you listen to Mark Butler and others, I mean, what he just said then was completely false. We have a strong plan for renewable energy and also for looking at the costs of electricity. We're doing so much in pumped hydro and so forth, but you wouldn't know that from listening to him, and he's the shadow minister. So it's got to be about the people, and you've got to have a good policy plan. And if we worry about the polls all the time, we'll get nowhere. So we've got to focus on the people. Another policy which is in the papers and certainly caught headlines over the weekend is the possibility of a private member's bill by your West Australian Senate colleague Dean Smith on the issue of same-sex marriage. Now, he crossed the floor in the Senate against the plebiscite, so he's been consistent on this, Senator Smith, for a long time now. But do you find that frustrating? I mean, he's a senator. You're sitting there trying to hold down a marginal seat without which the government doesn't hold
onto incumbency. Do you find it frustrating that someone like Senator Smith can be doing something like this that becomes a distraction?
Look, I respect Senator Smith. He's a good guy. I'm friends with him. I mean, that issue is obviously close to his heart, and I understand that he wants to, see same-sex marriage a reality. So I do understand that, but we also need to work together as a team, and we also need to make sure that we commit to the election commitments we made. So I guess at times you can find it frustrating, but Senator Smith isn't someone that does that week in, week out. So I got no problems with Senator Smith.
All right, well, what about this issue? It's on the front page of The Australian. You would have seen it, no doubt. Wholesale electricity prices. It's an exclusive by our Queensland editor at the Oz, Michael McKenna. Wholesale electricity prices in Queensland have been the most expensive in the national energy market for most of this year, as its state-owned generators more than double the dividends that it paid to the debt-riven Palaszczuk Labor government. Can the Federal Liberal Party do anything about that in government?
Well, what we can do is the states obviously have most of the responsibility here. We're not the bosses of the states. In the Constitution, they decide what they do. A lot of people don't realise that. But what it does show is a hypocrisy, once again, of the state Labor Party and Palaszczuk at the last election, who said, oh, well, we're not going to lease assets or sell assets and your electricity will be cheaper. They've gone on to flog off assets left, right and centre, whether it's schools or other land that they've done, and we've seen electricity prices go through the roof. And we all remember, you would remember, Peter, when Campbell Newman was the Premier of this state and he said, we've got a problem here, we've got $80 billion in debt that the state owes, and the Labor Party said, oh, we don't owe that much, we only owe $55 billion, and they shifted $25 billion onto their assets. And now we wonder why their assets are trying to make record profits to repay that debt, and every person in my electorate and right across the state is seeing their electricity bills go through the roof to repay that debt that Labor created, and they wonder why their electricity bills are going up. So,
well, one of the solutions,
that's a real issue.
One of the solutions, if I can just jump in there, I mean, Barnaby Joyce, we spoke to him on Sunday Agenda yesterday. He's floated the idea that the government should step in and build its own clean, in quotation marks, coal-fired power station. Do you think that that's something that the government should be doing? Michael Sukkar, for example, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer, he doesn't like the idea of state-owned electricity generators. As a Liberal, he says.
Yeah, look, I'm not as hard and fast on that. I think whatever, at the end of the day, is best for the consumer, how to get electricity prices stable. I never promise anyone that electricity prices are going to come down, because there's not much in history that actually falls in price. I mean, what we should be doing as governments is saying, let's stabilise it, let's stop the massive increases, and as we move more to renewable energy, to make sure that it doesn't continue to go up.
Though, I've got to jump in there, because some members of the government, including ministers, are saying that they think they can bring prices down. I mean, I agree with you that more realistically, let's be realistic about this, it's about slowing and hopefully completely arresting the increase in prices. It's a bit OTT, isn't it, for anyone to claim that they can really bring them down? Even Finkel sort of suggests that it could come down marginally. I think, personally, that's pie in the sky.
Well, look, with every business there's costs, and if cost of living goes up, staff members need an increase in wages. When wages increase, you need to, charge higher prices. So I'm with you. Let's keep it stable, let's keep it steady. I don't promise anyone, my electorate, they'll come down. And the states do have a large responsibility here, but we are doing this. The Turnbull government is doing a lot. We're making sure that gas has a priority for domestic supply before it's exported, number one. We're also putting more money into pumped hydro, which, when you look at storage, and the Prime Minister's been the only politician, or the first politician, to really talk about storage, massive capacity for storage through pumped hydro at the scheme in South Australia, and Snowy Hydro 2.0. And in relation to clean coal, where we've got heaps of coal, 95% of Queensland's electricity still is coal. So if we can clean up that and make it cleaner with lower emissions, then that's great. I'm agnostic when it comes to the type of energy. Let's just make sure we reduce emissions, and if we can use coal, then that's a good thing. But we need to be focused on the people to make sure that bills don't continue to rise. And I think Josh Frydenberg and the Prime Minister are focused on that.
Liberal MP for the seat of Petrie up in Queensland. Luke Howarth, always appreciate you joining us. Thanks for your company.
Thank you, Peter.
We're going to move back overseas now, and the Donald Trump